Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Moni Gambhir. Let's get started. Our top story tonight on Gravitas focuses on what's happening in West Asia. As Israel threatens to open the gates of hell in Gaza, American strategic bombers seem to have reached the war zones. The question is, what will all of this mean for the region? And what happens from here onwards? We dissect the developments for you and get you the bigger picture. That's coming up shortly. Also on the show for you tonight, we tell you all about the big power struggle unfolding over Ukraine. European leaders are scrambling to secure their involvement in Ukraine's future. We also get you live updates on this from Paris. The bird flu has greatly impacted America's poultry industry, and now America will reportedly turn to Turkey for egg imports. We tell you more. All this and more coming up. Our top story tonight comes from West Asia as Israel threatens to open the gates of hell in Gaza, quote unquote. American strategic bombers seem to have reached the war zones. That's right. According to reports online and data from flight radar, an air squadron consisting of 6 military aircraft belonging to the US Air Force has been flying over the Mediterranean Sea. In fact, the squadron reportedly includes 2 Boeing B-52 Stratofortress bombers, which are American strategic bombers, and 48 Boeing KC-135 Strato tanker aircraft designated for refueling jets and bombers in midair. The warplanes reportedly took off on Monday from an American base in England, and their flight path shows them flying over the Mediterranean, near southern Europe and North Africa. There is a possibility that these warplanes are heading towards West Asia, although it is not yet clear. Still, this development would not be surprising, as the future of an already fragile Gaza ceasefire is hanging by a thread. In fact, over the weekend, the American Secretary of State Marco Rubio kicked off his first West Asia tour, showing strong support for Israel and issuing a warning to Iran. Rubio's words encouraged Israel as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to, quote-unquote, finish the job against Iran and threatened Hamas with US backing. The Trump administration also sent heavy Mk-84 bombs to Israel, lifting a previous block imposed by Joe Biden. And this shows a united front between the US and Israel on Gaza. And on what? Gaza's total destruction. Because just have a look at the visuals on your screen. This is what Gaza looks like today. A picture of destruction, of total devastation, to say the least. Israel's Prime Minister warns of opening the gates of hell on Gaza. In fact, even US President Trump has described Gaza as a hellhole. But the question is, what more can possibly be devastated in Gaza? Over 48,200 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza by Israeli attacks in the war. Around 90% of Gaza's population has been displaced, and over 245,000 housing units have been damaged in Gaza. Ask that question, and you will get no answers, at least from Israel. Israel is reportedly still blocking the entry of shelters into the Gaza Strip, which was one of the conditions, remember, of the ceasefire agreement. Tens of thousands of mobile homes, part of the ceasefire deal, have not yet been allowed into Gaza. They remain stuck at the Rafah crossing with Egypt, awaiting Israeli permission to enter. Under the ceasefire, Israel had agreed to allow 60,000 mobile homes and 10,000 tents into Gaza. However, now reports indicate that only 20,000 tents have been allowed in, and none of the mobile homes have gained access. And now, as Israel continues with its aggression in Gaza, it has sent a negotiating team to Egypt to discuss a hostage deal. And reports indicate that the Israeli government is seeking to modify the terms of the deal with support from Washington. Specifically, Israel is calling for the 6 surviving hostages remaining in Gaza, who are scheduled to be released in the initial phase of the agreement, to be freed all at once next Saturday, rather than in 2 groups of 3. Over the final 2 weeks of this phase, which ends on March 1. Quick question at this point: is Israel preparing to return to aggression in Gaza? We ask that because of the conflicting messages coming in from Israel. You see, on one hand, Israel has sent a team to Cairo. On the other hand, it continues to block aid supplies to Gaza. And that's not all. Threats have been made to open the gates of hell. If Hamas does not release the remaining captives, the Trump administration, in fact, is now fully backing Israel's military objectives in Gaza, casting further doubts on the already shaky truce deal. And there appears to be little political will from Netanyahu, and certainly from his right-wing allies, to proceed with the second phase of the ceasefire. Just for context here, phase 2 of the ceasefire deal is set to commence immediately after the first phase ends on the 1st of March. And this phase basically would involve the release of all remaining male Israeli captives, including soldiers. So far, 19 hostages have been released. In exchange, Israel will fully withdraw from Gaza and release more Palestinian prisoners. However, Netanyahu, facing immense pressure at home from the families of hostages and from far-right elements within his cabinet, finds himself in a deadlock. Resuming military action after Trump established the goal of expelling Palestinians from Gaza would be seen by allies as a failure. Yet, moving forward with the second stage of the ceasefire could topple Netanyahu's government, and he is in a challenging position. Remember, Israel has not met its goal to wipe out Hamas, and now with Trump's big goals for Gaza, that goal seems even more difficult to achieve for Israel. And on the other hand, continuing with the ceasefire, a full withdrawal from Gaza, and prisoner exchanges, including the release of high-profile prisoners, seems virtually impossible for Netanyahu's current government. And what happens next is anybody's guess. Let's now shift our focus from one conflict zone to another, Ukraine. A big power struggle is currently unfolding over Ukraine, and no, I'm not talking about the conflict between the West and Russia. In fact, not even close. I'm talking about the West's war unity over Ukraine. It's not only weakened, but it's crystal clear today that it is shattered. European leaders are scrambling to secure their involvement in Ukraine's future. In fact, in Paris, the French President Emmanuel Macron has convened a summit in a bid to find a path forward. As US and Russian officials prepare to meet without European participation to discuss Ukraine's situation. But can the Paris meeting make Europe relevant again? Is the immediate question. Have a look at the latest developments. On Monday, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Riyadh as part of his first trip to West Asia. This trip, in fact, comes ahead of anticipated talks with Russian officials aimed at ending the nearly 3-year war in Ukraine. It follows a phone call last week between US President Donald Trump and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump has, by the way, instructed top officials to begin talks on ending the war, a promise that, remember, he made during his presidential campaign. Now, these talks are happening without any Ukrainian or European representatives. And this is why European leaders are holding an emergency meeting in Paris. With US and Russian envoys preparing for talks in Saudi Arabia, Europe has in a way been virtually sidelined from the Ukraine peace talks. And European leaders are now trying to figure out how to regain relevance in the discussions about Ukraine's future. Convened by French President Emmanuel Macron, the summit will be seeing key regional leaders who will seek to navigate a solution outside the formal structures of the European Union. It will basically include Germany's Olaf Scholz, Italy's Giorgia Meloni, Poland's Donald Tusk, Denmark's Mette Frederiksen, Spain's Pedro Sanchez, the Netherlands' Wopke Hoekstra, along with the EU President Ursula von der Leyen and the Council President Antonio Costa. And the meeting will basically address what defense capabilities Europe could provide to ensure that Ukraine has credible security guarantees, including a proposal for Ukraine to receive automatic NATO membership in the event of a clear ceasefire breach by Russia. But the signs of rift were clear last week itself. From comments in Europe by several US officials, comments from the Secretary of Defense in Brussels, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Special Russia-Ukraine Envoy General Keith Kellogg in Munich, and then by Donald Trump himself after his hour-and-a-half phone call with Vladimir Putin. And these developments have in a way poured cold water on any hopes of US and Europe working together towards Ukraine's future. Over the past week, European leaders have had a rude awakening in a way regarding the state of the transatlantic alliance. The Finnish president, for that matter, has perhaps best summarized Europe's situation. He quoted a famous phrase from Soviet leader Vladimir Ilyich Lenin saying, "There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen."
This order is easy to disrupt, it's easy to destroy, but it's much harder to rebuild. So let us stick to these values.
Indeed, Europeans now realize they are in many ways on their own. Of course, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that Ukraine will not accept any outcomes from discussions in which it was not involved. However, Zelensky has also been sidelined from decisions regarding his own country by Washington, while Europe has not abandoned Ukraine entirely, with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer stating he would consider deploying British troops to Ukraine if a deal to end the war with Russia is reached. Not everyone in Europe shares the same enthusiasm. In fact, it could be said that Europe is a divided house when it comes to Ukraine. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said that any discussion of European troops participating in a peacekeeping force in Ukraine is premature. According to Reuters, Scholz also spoke more broadly about European security, saying that supporting Ukraine and its army will be, in his words, a great task for Europe, for the US, and international alliance partners. And he's not wrong, by the way. Europe is already struggling to recruit soldiers for their own national armies. The question is, how will they help Ukraine? The clock is ticking and all eyes are on European leaders. Can Europe re-establish itself in the conversation about Ukraine's future? We will have to wait and watch. Speaking of which, with us on the broadcast this minute is our correspondent Ross Cullen from Paris, France, who's been tracking those developments very closely. Ross, thanks very much for being here. Let me begin by asking you for what the latest is in terms of that meeting. A lot, of course, riding on it. It is a rather important attempt by Europe to regain relevance as far as the conversation on Ukraine is concerned.
Yeah, that's right. That meeting is underway right now at the Elysee Palace here in the centre of the French capital. European leaders spent the weekend scrambling to try to get this organised. The last-minute summit hastily arranged a meeting after the explosive speech by J.D. Vance, the US Vice President at the Munich Security Conference, stunning European leaders. The realisation that the European continent is not going to have that ultimate backstop, the ultimate guarantor of collective security going forward as the United States. They're going to have to take more responsibility themselves, and that responsibility they're going to have to increase it very quickly, increase the size of their national armies, increase the size of their defence budgets,
right.
Potentially also an agreement at these talks to increase the overall domestic production of arms, artillery and military production here in Europe. The military-industrial complex might have to be completely reshaped as a result of the US administration changing its politics, forcing Europe to also change its overall security policies.
Right. Ross, tell us more about the situation that Europe finds itself in, given the divisions within that continue to come to the forefront.
Well, Europe is continuing to back Ukraine. That is the underlying message from a lot of the leaders here, like the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who is in attendance in Paris on Monday for those talks, saying that we will be backing Ukraine and we could even be deploying troops inside Ukraine as peacekeepers if there is a peace agreement signed between Kiev and Moscow. If it's necessary, if Ukraine requires that, then we will be ready to step up to the plate. Even in February last year, President Macron said that we are not taking off the table the idea of Western boots on the ground inside Ukraine. For now, the Spanish Foreign Minister, also attending these talks, says it's too early to talk about troops being sent inside Ukraine because we are still some way off agreeing to a peace settlement between Ukraine and Russia. But that is certainly one of the key topics dominating the conversation about European soldiers eventually, in some capacity, being inside Ukraine.
Right, we're leaving it there for the moment, Ross. Thanks very much for giving us those updates. And let's now shift our focus to the Taiwan Strait. Will Taiwan become an independent country with Donald Trump's help? You know why that question is being raised? A critical phrase from the US State Department's official Taiwan fact sheet is now gone. The phrase explicitly stated, quote, "We do not support Taiwan independence," unquote. What would that mean, and how has China reacted? No points for guessing. Beijing is furious. In fact, China's foreign ministry has slammed the move, calling it a violation of international law and a dangerous provocation. Listen in.
The revision of the fact sheet on US-Taiwan relations by the US State Department, which seriously regressed its position on Taiwan-related issues, seriously violated the One China principle and sent a serious wrong signal to the Taiwan independence separatist forces. This is another example of the US side's stubborn adherence to the wrong policy of using Taiwan to contain China. We urge the US side to correct its mistakes immediately, stop condoning and supporting Taiwan independence, and avoid causing further serious damage to Sino-US relations and peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait.
In fact, the Chinese Communist Party sees Taiwan as an inseparable part of its territory, and the Chinese President Xi Jinping has vowed to unify Taiwan with the mainland, even by force if necessary. And over the past 1 year, Chinese warplanes have been making their presence increasingly felt around the Taiwan Strait. And according to a top US military commander in the Indo-Pacific, US Navy Admiral Samuel Paparo, Chinese military exercises near Taiwan are no longer just routine drills. Rather, they are a rehearsal for war. Meanwhile, Taiwan has welcomed the US move. According to reports, Taiwan's foreign minister called it a positive step in strengthening ties between Washington and Taipei. Taiwan has its own government, military and economy, yet it remains locked out of major international organizations due to Beijing's influence. And according to experts, the latest US move could give Taiwan a glimmer of hope that perhaps Washington under Trump will take a stronger stance in its favor. Over the past few years, America has ramped up military support for Taiwan. Billions of dollars worth of weapons, advanced missile systems, fighter jets have either been approved or already delivered. And China has repeatedly warned that any declaration of independence from Taiwan would lead to war. The US has never made an explicit commitment to defend Taiwan militarily, maintaining ambiguity in a way in this regard. But could the latest development change all of this? In fact, just last week, 2 US Navy ships sailed through the Taiwan Strait, which prompted an angry rebuke from China. You see, during his first term, Donald Trump took a hardline approach against China. He approved major arms sales to Taiwan, sent high-level US officials to Taipei, and even took a call from Taiwan's president, breaking decades of diplomatic precedent. The question is, will Trump go further in his second term as president? Will he openly support Taiwan's independence? Will he abandon strategic ambiguity and make a direct security pledge to Taipei? And more importantly, how will Beijing respond? For now, every move matters and is being watched very closely. And before we move on, let's tell you what else is lined up for you on the show tonight. We get you a special report on India's dark web of cybercrime and how you can stay safe. How important is a good night's sleep for your mental health? Turns out, a lot more than you think. A study sheds light on how a good night's sleep may help restrict bad memories. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has sparked another political storm, and this time the opposition is calling it outright authoritarian and questioning Trump's view of power and the Constitution. Trump posted on Truth Social and X, I'm quoting here, "He who saves his country does not violate any law," quote unquote. The White House's official X account reinforced the message by sharing it alongside Trump's presidential portrait. But does that phrase sound familiar to you? Well, it's not original. In fact, it's a quote often attributed to Napoleon Bonaparte, the French general who declared himself emperor and ruled with an iron grip. And Trump has referenced Napoleon before as well. But this latest remark has reignited fears among his opponents, with Democrats and political experts wasting no time in reacting. Reacting to Trump's post, US Senator from California, Adam Schiff, said that the US president has, quote-unquote, spoken like a true dictator. Meanwhile, former US Vice President Mike Pence took a more indirect approach. On X, he reshared a 2010 essay that he wrote, titled "The Presidency and the Constitution," warning that a president who disregards the Constitution is bound to fall, taking the nation down with him. Elon Musk, who heads the US Department of Government Efficiency, reposted Trump's message on X with 14 US flag emojis. Now, this latest row comes on the heels of another turbulent week in Trump's second term. The Trump administration has aggressively pushed agendas. But US federal judges have repeatedly intervened, blocking key policies aimed at restructuring federal agencies and budgets. Trump's allies are questioning the legitimacy of these judicial rulings, fueling concerns overall about an escalating power struggle. In fact, recently, US Vice President J.D. Vance posted on X, and I'm quoting here, "Judges are not allowed to control the executive's legitimate power." While last week, during a news briefing, the White House press secretary accused the media of fear-mongering about a constitutional crisis, adding that the real constitutional crisis is taking place within the U.S. judicial branch, where district court judges are abusing their power to block Trump's basic executive authority. And Trump and the U.S. courts have been at odds over multiple issues. We've been telling you about that. For example, last week, a federal judge in Boston halted the Trump administration's plan to cut $4 billion in federal funding for medical research. In fact, the legal cases against the Trump administration are only piling up. According to the Associated Press, Trump's administration is entangled in at least 70 lawsuits across the U.S., cases ranging from Trump's efforts to revoke birthright citizenship to his decision to freeze federal grants and even unauthorized access to sensitive government databases by unofficial entities, with legal challenges mounting and his defiance growing bolder. Experts have said that Trump's words and actions are under scrutiny. So is Trump merely pushing boundaries, or is there more to this than meets the eye? And staying on with the United States, the bird flu epidemic has greatly impacted America's poultry industry, forcing the US to reportedly turn to Turkey for egg imports. In fact, according to reports, the US government has signed a preliminary deal to bring in 15,000 tons of eggs by June from Turkey in an attempt to ease a worsening egg shortage that has left grocery store shelves empty and prices soaring across the US. For over 3 years now, the highly contagious H5N1 virus has ravaged American farms. At least 158 million birds, including chickens, turkeys, hens, have been culled to contain the spread. And according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the situation further escalated this winter, with 18 million birds euthanized in December and another 23 million in January. Eggs, once a breakfast staple taken for granted in American households, are reportedly now a scarce commodity. Supermarkets across the country are reportedly rationing purchases, and some major retail chains have imposed stricter measures, capping sales of eggs at 3 cartons per shopper. The impact extends beyond grocery stores, by the way. According to reports, popular breakfast chains in America are struggling to keep up with the rising costs and have introduced surcharges to their menus for eggs. In fact, in just 1 year, egg prices have shot up reportedly nearly 65% across the US. In December, a dozen eggs cost an average of around $4, more than double of what it was in August 2023. And by January, the price had climbed to nearly $5 per dozen eggs, an increase of nearly $1 in just 1 month's time. The surge in egg prices is reportedly driving up overall food costs across the US. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has warned that the worst may be yet to come. Officials predict egg prices could spike another 20% in 2025. Meanwhile, the virus's impact on human health is also raising alarms. Since the start of 2024, 69 human cases have been recorded in America, including the death of a 65-year-old Louisiana man who contracted the virus after exposure to infected animals. In Nevada, dairy cows have tested positive for a strain of avian flu that has caused severe illness in human beings. And even domesticated cats have tested positive. The discoveries reportedly sparked fears that the virus could mutate further, increasing the risk of a broader pandemic and making it even more dangerous for human beings. With no immediate solution in sight, the US faces a dual crisis: soaring food prices and an unpredictable public health threat. And let's now switch attention to the Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC, where the Rwandan-backed M23 rebels have been advancing deep in the mineral-rich eastern region. And now the African Union has sent a stark warning that Congo could very well break up if the situation in the eastern part of the country remains the same. The African Union's Peace and Security Commissioner has said that the organization is strictly against the balkanization of Eastern DRC. What does he mean and why is this being said? Our next report getting you the complete story.
M23 fighters and Rwandan troops got a rather glorious reception as they entered the DR Congo provincial capital of Bukavu, shortly after having seized the region's main Goma airport about 30 kilometers away. Here are images and scenes of celebration, with people on the streets clapping and cheering on as the fighters marched and drove into the city center. With practically no resistance from government troops. Since the beginning of the year, the rebel group M23 has been on the offensive in the eastern part of the country and has steadily gained ground. Bukavu being the second key city after Goma and home to 1 million people to fall to the rebels in the mineral-rich region in the past few weeks. A fall barely defended by the Congolese armed forces or the FARDC. A move which could lead the M23 forces to gain complete control in the coming days. Reacting to this, Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi slammed what he said were Rwanda's expansionist ambitions, as well as accused Rwanda of ignoring calls for an immediate ceasefire. As the troops closed in on Bukavu's outskirts, shops and businesses had closed in the city, while frightened civilians were seen fleeing homes. In a conflict that appears to be escalating by the hour, fears of violence gripped Bukavu. So much so that the civil groups urged Congolese troops not to fight in the city.
We want the authorities who are now in the city to help us with our security. Here in Bukavu, we have a serious problem with these young children who have already taken up arms. They are shooting in the neighborhoods, preventing people from going to work. We ask the authorities in the city to take these children, not to kill them, but just to take away their weapons so that every citizen can go about their daily activities as usual.
On the other hand, the leaders of the African Union warn against the balkanization or the breakup of the DRC. The AU's Peace and Security Commissioner told reporters that they are demanding for the immediate removal of M23 and their supporters from all towns and cities, including the Goma airport.
The only way to solve the problem in Eastern DRC is for all parties to sit around the table. And the African Union is ready to play that mediation role.
The rapid advance of rebel forces in the country's east since the beginning of 2025 has stoked fears of a broader regional war, which dates back to tensions and clashes that erupted during the Rwandan genocide in 1990. And decades later, as it stands now, it is no longer just a regional conflict, but one that has rattled other nations as well. From the looks of it, the rebels appear to be pretty much unstoppable when it comes to capturing more territories and taking them swiftly under control. What happens next? Will peace return soon or remain a distant hope in the strife-torn region? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
If you are based out of Delhi NCR, I'm sure it's been a shaky morning for you, quite literally. The people of the national capital woke up to strong tremors as an earthquake of 4.0 magnitude rocked parts of the city, even as earthquakes in Delhi are somewhat of a routine affair in a way, thanks to the location near a seismic zone. Mind you, this was no ordinary earthquake. And why is that? It was not just Delhi NCR which reeled under the impact of such an earthquake, as a similar one also hit Bihar in North India. Let's just talk about Delhi first. When the earthquake struck in the early hours of Monday, residents were jolted out of their sleep, prompting many to rush outdoors from buildings. Even as Delhi was the epicenter, the tremors were felt in areas like Noida, Greater Noida, Ghaziabad. However, what is unique is the fact that a loud rumbling sound followed the earthquake, lasting for seconds before it faded away. What explains that? Experts suggest that this could be the effect of shallow earthquakes, movement in tectonic plates, and several bursts of energy. And how can that be identified, you ask? Well, shallow earthquakes are between 0 to 70 kilometers deep and originate almost 5 or 10 kilometers below the surface, and which tends to cause more damage than those originating deep below the surface of the earth. According to India's National Centre for Seismology, or NCS, the earthquake was caused by normal faulting, which is basically a type of ground movement often linked to underground water or past river deposits, weakening the rocks. In Bihar as well, a 4.0 magnitude earthquake hit Siwan district at around 8 a.m. in the morning. But what makes Delhi so particularly vulnerable to earthquakes? Delhi is placed in seismic zone 4 in the seismic zoning map of India, the second highest in the country when it comes to risk category, which exposes the region to moderate to high risk seismic activity due to Himalayan earthquakes. The earthquakes in Delhi are also a result of the movement of the Indian plate and local fault systems, with the soft alluvial soil lining the region further, amplifying seismic waves and making tremors feel stronger than their actual magnitude. And this is hardly the first instance. As in the past, Delhi and its surrounding areas have experienced notable earthquakes, some of the strongest being 7.5 magnitude Garhwal Himalaya earthquake in 1803, 7.8 magnitude earthquake in Nepal in 2015, and a few moderate earthquakes from the Hindu Kush region. But this only seems to be the tip of an iceberg, as scientists warn that a powerful earthquake of over 8.0 magnitude in the Himalayas is overdue, which could have devastating consequences for Delhi and northern India. But the more important and critical question is Delhi even prepared for an earthquake of such a scale? Are the buildings, many of which are old constructions and happen to be inadequately spaced out, even equipped to handle the tremors of big quakes? And if they are not, what is the way forward? Experts suggest retrofitting older buildings, enforcing stricter seismic codes, and improving earthquake preparedness are the only means to mitigate potential damage in the future. Can Delhi survive another high voltage jolt like the one it experienced today? Only time will tell. Moving on for now, US President Donald Trump has declared BRICS dead. And this comes just months after repeatedly threatening 100% tariffs on its members over de-dollarization efforts. But why is Trump so concerned about BRICS? Why does the US see any move away from the dollar as a direct threat? And where does India stand in this evolving economic battle? Our next report getting you the answers.
US President Donald Trump has declared BRICS dead, citing concerns over de-dollarization. For months, Trump has warned BRICS members of 100% tariffs, accusing them of attempting to reduce reliance on the US dollar. BRICS, originally formed by Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, has expanded to include Egypt, Iran, the UAE and Ethiopia, with Saudi Arabia considering joining. The group now represents over 31.5% of global GDP, surpassing the G7's share at 30%. Despite Western concerns, BRICS is not an anti-Western alliance, as key members including India, Egypt and UAE maintain strong ties with the US and its allies. India views BRICS as a crucial multilateral platform to reform the global financial system, historically dominated by Western institutions. It also serves as an economic gateway, enhancing India's trade access to Central Asia through Iran, North Africa via Egypt and Eastern Africa via Ethiopia. The core issue behind Trump's reaction is de-dollarization. The effort to reduce dependency on the US dollar for international trade and reserves. While India has distanced itself from any active de-dollarization policy, other BRICS members have pushed forward. Since 2001, the US dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has fallen from over 70% to 59% in early 2023. The BRICS Plus bloc now accounts for 37% of emerging market fuel trade, significantly shifting global energy transactions away from dollar dominance. China, a major BRICS player, has increased its yuan-based trade settlements. By mid-2024, 27% of China's trade in goods was settled in renminbi, up from 17% in 2022. Russia has moved away from the dollar, selling energy in alternative currencies. However, despite these shifts, the dollar is still used in nearly 90% of global forex transactions, showing its entrenched position in international finance. The dominance of the US dollar is rooted in historical advantages, deep capital markets, a stable legal system, and a vast financial network. However, growing global diversification threatens its long-term position. Persistent US trade deficits have led to foreign liabilities exceeding $34 trillion, raising concerns about an oversupply of dollars in global markets. Another challenge is the increasing weaponization of the dollar. The freezing of $300 billion in Russian reserves after the Ukraine invasion has made nations wary of over-reliance on the US financial system. This has driven BRICS nations to develop alternative financial mechanisms, including the newly announced BRICS Pay System and Central Bank Digital Currency initiatives. Despite these shifts, replacing the dollar remains a long-term challenge. Unlike the dollar, China's renminbi is only 4% of global reserves and is still subject to capital controls. The BRICS bloc may continue reducing dollar dependency, but for now, the dollar remains the world's dominant reserve currency. Trump's tariff threats add a new layer of complexity, forcing BRICS nations, especially India, to navigate economic partnerships carefully. As geopolitical tensions rise, the battle over global currency dominance is far from over. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
Cyber attacks in India are rising fast, far above the global average. The dark web is fueling this surge. And as threats grow, the question is India prepared to fight back? Let's take a closer look in this report.
India is facing an unprecedented surge in cyber attacks, surpassing the global average. Critical sectors, businesses and individuals remain at high risk, with cyber criminals exploiting vulnerabilities to steal data and launch ransomware attacks. A key driver behind the rise is the dark web, an anonymous online marketplace for illegal transactions. Reports indicate that the dark web accounts for 5% of the entire internet, with around 2.5 million daily visitors in 2023. Nearly 56.8% of its content is linked to illegal activities, including financial fraud and cybercrime. This growing underground economy is fueling data breaches, identity theft, and the sale of stolen digital assets. The dark web plays a crucial role in modern cybercrime, with businesses being prime targets. Reports show that approximately 543 million digital assets linked to Fortune 1000 employees are available for sale. Ransomware-related breaches have doubled each year over the past 2 years, significantly impacting financial stability and corporate reputation. Cybercriminals operate through highly structured online marketplaces, offering stolen credentials, fake identities, and hacking tools. Prices are alarming. A package of 1,000 malware attacks costs $5,000. Cloned credit cards with pins are available for $25, and stolen PayPal accounts with a $100 balance sell for just $30. In India, 20% of cyber crimes involve dark web transactions, with telecom data from 750 million users recently leaked online. Despite India contributing 26% of the dark web's user base, awareness remains low. Within BRICS nations, only 28% of people are familiar with how the dark web operates. Hacktivist activities are also on the rise, with attackers leaking sensitive data when ransom demands go unmet. Experts warn that weak cybersecurity measures and rapid digitalization make Indian businesses an easy target. Cryptocurrencies remain central to cybercrime, facilitating anonymous transactions on the dark web. Bitcoin remains the dominant currency, though alternatives like Litecoin and Dash are gaining popularity. Efforts indicate that crypto-enabled financial crime surged 70% year-on-year, with India contributing 6.9% of global cyber attacks. To counter these risks, experts suggest stronger regulations. On the front, India has taken steps to strengthen cybersecurity. The Digital Personal Data Protection Act provides a legal framework for safeguarding personal data and raising awareness. Union Home Minister Amit Shah has emphasized the need for joint efforts by law enforcement agencies to tackle cyber threats linked to the dark web, cryptocurrencies, and online marketplaces. But with artificial intelligence at the helm of business affairs, the response has to be swift and proactive. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
Shifting focus for now, artificial intelligence is just about everywhere. There's no escaping it. It's in our smartphones, computers. It's even being used by big corporations, governments. From everyday work life, when writing an email, for example, or doing homework, AI can play a role. And it's also helping in more complex jobs, like diagnosing diseases, accelerating drug development. Even in the battlefield, it's helping to identify and destroy enemy targets. Around 300 million people worldwide use AI today. And that number, by the way, is set to soar to 739 million by 2030. Like the advent of machines and computers, AI promised to transform our lives, and how? Making work faster, simpler, more efficient. But at what cost? A new study by Microsoft Research and Carnegie Mellon University warns that AI reliance might be eroding our cognitive abilities. Brain rot, you must have heard that term. It's often linked to endless doom scrolling. But this research suggests basically that overusing AI leads to the worsening of cognitive faculties. AI excels when it comes to automating tasks, yet its very convenience may be making us dumber. Researchers studied 319 knowledge workers to see how AI affects critical thinking, and the results were stark. The more workers relied on AI, the less critical thinking they engaged in. Instead of problem solving, they became mere overseers. checking AI's work rather than actively engaging in complex thinking. The study basically highlights a troubling shift. Jobs are no longer about solving problems, but ensuring AI correctly solves them. And this transition from task execution to task stewardship leaves workers feeling mentally sluggish, even less capable perhaps. And even more concerning, those relying on AI for complex reasoning produced a narrower range of solutions as compared to those thinking independently. What's the conclusion? Automating routine tasks deprives users of the chance to practice judgment and sharpen their cognitive skills. And over time, this leads to weakened mental faculties, making people less prepared for real-world challenges. And AI is a powerful tool, but blind reliance on it may come at a huge cost. Moving on for now, let me ask you a question at this point. How often have you wished that you could erase bad memories from your system, like they never existed, as if that bad episode or that bad day never happened in the first place? That there was a magic wand to let go of intrusive memories? Well, what if there is? According to a study, a good night's sleep may help restrict bad memories. You heard that right. Now, we all know that good sleep and giving our bodies adequate rest is the answer to a lot of problems and health issues. But these findings mean sleep and mental health have a far deeper link. Sleep clearly is extremely important for our health, and it could also help in removing our bad memories. Let's just break this down for you. What we are talking about is a study from the University of York and the University of East Anglia in the UK. It basically suggests that disrupted sleep and sleep loss interferes with that ability, making intrusive memories more persistent, and the impact of sleep deprivation on behavioral expression of memory control was also assessed. The findings tell us a lot more about the relationship between sleep and our brain and mental health, demonstrating that depriving healthy participants of sleep disrupts their ability to keep intrusive memories at bay. The thing is, intrusive memories could be a momentary disturbance for most people, but they can be recurrent, vivid, and upsetting for people suffering from mental health disorders like depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And given the significance of intrusive memories, a better understanding of the mechanisms that actually precipitate their occurrence is super important for improving emotional well-being and also reducing the global burden of mental illness. And the findings offer fresh insight into our understanding of the cognitive and neural mechanisms underlying the link between poor sleep and mental illness. Sleep disturbances are associated with intrusive memories, and this is your cue to do what you can to ensure that you are sleeping well. There is help out there as well. There is guidance that you can rely on. A good night's sleep is a lot more important than you thought, and it has far-reaching implications for your mental health and overall well-being. So do what you can to look after yourself.